Hello EU4 players, my name's Riemann, and today I'm going to tell you how to crush the Reformation. The division in Christendom is one of the most important factors in EU4 that changes relations, aggressive expansion, alliances, and more. While this can be good for some nations, it's very bad if you want religious unity, a united Holy Roman Empire, or if you're going for one faith. However, with some effort, it's possible to extinguish the fires of reform shortly after they ignite, allowing you to push Europe down a very different path of history. Throughout this guide, there's going to be several special actions that the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire can take to help defeat the Reformation. It's also the case that the Emperor has the most to gain from the Reformation being destroyed, and it's within the HRE that much of the Reformation takes place in. Because of this, I'm going to assume that you'll be Emperor by 1500. That's not a terribly difficult thing to do if you're an experienced player, but for simplicity's sake, I'm going to start out as the original Emperor, Austria. If you want the path of least resistance, you can go Austria as well, but if you want to shake things up, you can go as someone like France or Bohemia or even Catholic Ottomans. Regardless of what you choose, as long as you can become Emperor, things will basically be the same. Now you probably know that when the game starts in 1444, Protestants don't exist. Europe is a sea of Catholicism, but that'll prove to be all too ephemeral. The Catholic world has a mechanic known as reform desire, which is influenced by events like this one, where a Catholic country can either take a bonus and increase reform desire, or they can take a penalty to not increase it. You might think it would be a good idea to take the penalty to slow reform desire. After all, the goal is to defeat the Reformation, not speed it along. However, the mechanics of the game are such that it's actually not worth it. The AI will almost always pick the option that increases reform desire, and so it's better to get a bonus for yourself than to try to be a drop of water that opposes the tidal wave. Apart from killing all AI Catholic nations before the turn of the century, there is no way to stop the Reformation from happening, so don't even try. Instead, you can use reform desire as a barometer of how close the Reformation is. The events that increase it are balanced such that it should get to 100 a bit after 1500. Getting to 100 doesn't automatically start the Reformation, but it is intrinsically linked to the Reformation's origin. The way the Reformation actually starts is through event. This event. It can occur when the following conditions are met. The nation must be a Catholic, with their capital in Europe, and their capital cannot be a religious center, which is to say it can't be Rome. The nation cannot be the defender of the faith, nor can it be the Pope, because that would be weird, and Reformation desire must be 95 or higher. Every Catholic nation has a chance to be the one that gets this event, and it'll become more and more likely the higher Reformation desire goes. In practice, it almost always occurs around 1500, unless the player has done something weird like import a CK2 map where they already own everything. 1500 is the critical date you want to be prepared by. So what should you be doing from 1444 to 1500? Well, if you're not the Emperor of the HRE, then you'll want to become so during this time. If you plan to use this strategy of destroying Protestantism in a larger game where you're uniting the HRE, then you'll probably be concerned with preventing the Shadow Kingdom event from firing, which is completely outside this strategy, but that's fine nonetheless. Beyond this though, you have a primary objective and two optional secondary objectives. More than anything else, you'll want to simply get stronger. You'll want to expand by collecting all the low-hanging fruit that exists for your country. Every major nation gets its own variety of this, like France gets its cores it can reconquer, Castile gets the Iberian wedding, and the Ottomans get the Turkish beyliks. Austria's version of this is unions with Hungary and Bohemia, along with the Burgundian inheritance. Austria's are a bit more chance-based than other major powers, but a skilled player should be able to scoop up most or all of these. You don't necessarily have to become the most powerful nation in the game, you just need to be strong enough that you'll have agency and won't have to rely on capricious allies for every step of the process to come. The first secondary objective is to take little outposts near areas that are likely to flip once the Reformation hits. These Protestant problem areas are, in order of priority, the non-Italian parts of the HRE, Scandinavia, and the British Isles. You want to border as many nations as you can in these regions, which means you can have a lot of outposts in the HRE, but you would really only ever need one or two in the other areas. As Emperor, you can get a casus belli to take lands by demanding unlawful territory. You can then use the CB to take the land for yourself, but do so sparingly. The aggressive expansion you'll incur will be ridiculous, so don't try to carve out a new power base, just take a territory here and there. This will make fabricating claims and doing holy wars later on more viable, and the more nations you can border, the more likely it'll be that you can use a real casus belli instead of having to do a no-CB war. The other secondary objective is that you should balkanize any large nations that you can in the problem areas. If you don't control Bohemia through a union, they should be your first target. Once again, being the emperor helps a lot here, because you can demand unlawful territory to reduce expansion so nobody gets too big too quickly. The point of having smaller nations is to make them easier to fight, and so you can get enough war score to convert them by peace deal. But I want to reiterate that these secondary objectives are optional and shouldn't be seen as critical. They're just something extra that can help you out if you're wondering where to go next. Something that's less optional is your idea group selection. I highly suggest taking diplomatic for your first group and religious for your second. Diplomatic ideas are the set that's more generally useful in the early game, with the Diplo rep being handy for taking and keeping emperorship. The real gem, though, is the lowered stability hit from diplomatic actions, which will be very useful in the event you need to declare no CB wars. The second set, religious, is probably pretty obvious. You should take it second because it's mostly useless without other religions, but when the Reformation starts, it'll be critical that you have the missionary strength to convert centers of Reformation. The Holy War casus belli is also very nice to have and can make converting other nations much easier. The Reformation should kick off sometime between 1500 and 1510. When it does, you need to drop everything you're doing because speed is critical. It will most likely originate in one of the problem areas I discussed earlier, and here you'll see your first center of Reformation. Following this, 2 other nations will quickly convert and spawn centers of Reformation in their own provinces for a total of 3 centers converting nearby provinces. The way these centers work is they pick a province that's less than 150 distance away and start converting it as if there is a missionary with 5% missionary strength. 150 distance is quite far, and so a center in a place even as far away as Scotland can cause problems for the HRE, so you'll want to go after all of them. The real danger of the centers is that when they start converting provinces, a lot of nations in the problem areas will flip and start using their missionaries to convert provinces as well, which can cascade into a wave of blue. The way the Reformation typically goes is this. It starts in a country, and the center of Reformation quickly starts turning its provinces. Soon enough, the country officially converts and starts using its own missionaries to convert as well. While this is happening, 2 other nations decided to convert and spawn their own centers. Once the centers have flipped most of the provinces in the host country, it will start targeting other nations, particularly those in the Protestant problem areas. Then, a little after 15 years, a new strain of anti-Catholicism will be born, known simply as Reformed. The entire cycle will start again with this purple religion, which has its own 3 centers of Reformation. As a player who wants to stop the Reformation, you have 3 objectives. The first, and by far the most important, is killing those centers. Those things are the main source of Protestant spread, and how quickly and effectively you deal with them determines how entrenched the heretics can become. Whenever a province converts, it gets a province modifier that prevents religious conversion for the next 30 years, which means you cannot immediately reverse the damage. You have 2 ways to deal with religious centers. The first option exists if the center is in the capital of a smaller country. You can fight them and take the peace option to enforce religion. Whenever you force religion, the religion of their capital will automatically change to yours, and if it had a center, it gets destroyed. The second option is a fallback that's somewhat inferior but is necessary for larger nations or if the center isn't in the capital. You simply have to conquer the province yourself and then convert it. It's likely that a major power like Sweden or England will flip early, so you'll have to do this on them. If you can do a holy war or fabricated claim, you should do so, otherwise declare a no CB war. When you get the province with a center, it will have -5% to conversion, but as long as you took religious ideas, you should be able to turn it back since the center doesn't get the -100% for 30 years that other converted provinces do. If you need to, you can also hire the advisor that gives you conversion power. Destroying 6 centers before they convert a significant amount of territory is certainly a challenge. If you're lucky, they'll all appear in German OPMs you have a border with. But realistically, at least a few will pop up in major nations who will probably have major allies that'll be a major pain to deal with. However, there are a few tips to make the process easier. First, you don't need to get a ton of war score in these conflicts. Your goal is to surgically strike to excise the tumor that is the center of Reformation. This should require less than 25% war score in most instances if you're conquering the province outright. Second, if you have no desire to stay in the area, you can give the province back by either selling it or giving it back for free. Holding the nation's cores is really bad for relations, so this should be done with nations you don't want to make permanent enemies out of. Third, you should first focus on eliminating centers in Germany, which will be the closest and can cause the most damage. And you should focus on attacking enemies that will be easy to beat. Even if you can't eliminate all of them, taking out 5 of the 6 centers will dramatically slow and geographically isolate the Reformation. Fourth, if you have the Mandate of Heaven expansion, you can take the Religious War's Age ability to reduce war score costs by 25%. Don't bother getting the Religion Enforced Edict. The war score one is much better. Finally, you'll get a grace period of 15 years before the 3 Reform Centers of Reformation will appear. If you finish off the Protestant ones prior to this, you can use the time to rest up and replenish manpower. Taking out the 6 centers can be difficult depending on where they spawn, but there should at least be a few easy ones that are in OPMs. If you successfully take them out, then congratulations, you've gone a long way in diminishing the Reformation's power, but you're not quite out of the woods yet. The second main objective should be easier, but is still very impactful. You want to make sure that none of the electors of the HRE are Protestant by 1550. It's fine if they're Reformed, just make sure they're not true blue Protestants. If you do this, the religious leagues won't form. This avoids so much nonsense that it should be your highest priority after exterminating the religious centers. Even if the Protestants don't have many countries, you'd still get silly nations like the Ottomans, France, Russia, and any of your enemies joining their side of the League. And even if they never declared war on you, they'd still make life difficult because they'd latch a bunch of countries to an impenetrable alliance web that could stall you for decades. Preventing that from happening is really nice. Unfortunately though, some of the larger electors may flip right back after you convert them, especially if their provinces still have the modifier that prevents reconversion for 30 years. If that's the case, it might be necessary to take most of their lands or annex them outright, which is what I did with Brandenburg. Whatever way you stop electors from being Protestant, you can confirm your victory in one of 2 ways. The first is by passing the reform that abolishes the elective monarchy of the HRE. Once it's hereditary, the electors effectively have no power, so leagues won't form. The other option is just to wait until a bit after 1625 when you'll get an event that will formally lock the HRE to Catholic automatically. The third and final objective is to simply kill off any stragglers. Most nations should stop changing religions once the centers are dealt with, but it's almost certain that some nations will be left over or will randomly convert from events. If you worked quickly, then they'll be pretty rare, and a few holy wars will teach them the true path. Or you can just conquer them outright if that's your style, because at this point, time is less of a concern. You probably want to make sure Protestants don't escape to the New World, but other than that, you can eliminate the stragglers at your leisure. Crushing the Protestant Reformation is a great mid-game goal for a united Holy Roman Empire campaign. After doing so, the path towards unification should be clear. Whether you're doing this for achievements, role-playing, or just for fun, obliterating Protestants is an interesting challenge that has the power to dramatically alter how a game plays out. My name's Riemann, and until next time, Deus Vult.